Hi guys, this is part 3 of the oral preparation videos that I have been preparing for you guys. I'll provide you with the links to part 1 and part 2 as well if you have not watched them. You don't have to watch these videos in a series. These videos just discuss a few selected questions that are normally asked to deck cadets who are appearing for third mate or second mate orals. So I just take a few selected questions and discuss the answers to them and how the candidates should be answering these questions to the supervisors. The reason I don't discuss all the questions is because, of course, it's not possible to firstly list out all the questions and discuss all the areas, and secondly, the videos would become too long to hold your interest. So I try to keep these videos to about 15 to 20 minutes long, and I'll keep making videos on oral preparations, and I hope you like them. So we'll start with the video. This is part 3. So the first question is that if a surveyor asks you that you're approaching a pilot station and when you require a pilot, describe your actions and duties as an officer on watch. So when approaching a pilot station, when you require a pilot, describe the actions and duties of the officer on watch. All right. So to answer this question, you can start with saying that as the officer on watch and when approximately 1 hour from the pilot station, I would comply with the International Safety Management Checklist and anticipate the following actions. So of course these days on the ships you have checklist or ISM checklist for mostly all operations, but you just simply cannot say that I will follow the checklist, and the surveyor or the oral examiner needs to know whether you know the content of the checklist or not. Alright, so you should mention the checklist for sure, because that shows that you have the knowledge about the presence of ISM checklist, and then you start with the contents of the checklist, whatever you can remember, but list them in an order in which you would be carrying out the actions on board. So if you just list them randomly, the surveyor or the examiner might think that you have just memorized the answers. So you have to make sure that you list them out in an orderly fashion that shows the order on which you will be performing these actions in the time of a real situation. All right, so the first action is advise the master of the expected and estimated time of arrival to the pilot board station. The master will probably be aware of it, and sometimes they carry out their own calculations. Of course, mostly they carry the master carries his or her own calculation. Establish communications with the pilot station and advise the pilot of the ship's name and the estimated time of arrival. It would be a normal practice to ascertain the pilot ladder details, that is which side the ladder is required on. So ask the pilot station on which side you should be putting the ladder and how much will be the height above the water. You can also mention whether man ropes are required or not, because many pilots don't like the man ropes to be there. Also, the local weather conditions at the rendezvous position, the position at which you will be meeting the pilot, should be established to enable the master to provide a lee for the launch. So by providing a lee means you get the vessel away from the wind, protect the pilot from the wind as much as you can, so that the pilot can climb the ladder quickly. Then continuous position monitoring should be ongoing throughout the approach. Remember that the master will probably mark the positions on the chart where the end of passage is required. That means you give the engine room notice to reduce the engine RPMs or engine revolutions, start to slow down the vessel and make sure that the vessel is ready to be maneuvered. So you can use the telegraph to adjust the ship's speed when required. Of course, the master takes over at that point of time, but these are some of the actions you should be listing to the surveyor. The underkeel clearance should be monitored throughout on approach by the use of the echo sounder, because as you are approaching the port approaches, it's quite possible that the depth or the underkeel clearance will start to reduce. It's a good idea to monitor it through the use of echo sounder. Effective lookout should be maintained at all times. The bridge team should establish to include changing from auto to manual steering and the position of extra lookouts. So of course manual steering should be used. Logbook entries should be made, so relevant entries should be put in the logbook. So at what point of time that because these are all legal requirements. So when you contact the pilot station and the pilot station provides you with some information about when the pilot will be approaching, what time you should be at the station, all these details should be logged in with the time with the channel on which you communicated, relevant details of end of passage, at what point of time the engine room was given notice to reduce the RPM, whatever is relevant should be noted down in the various logbooks. Sometimes you have different logbooks to note out different positions, so please do so. If you are in doubt whether information should be noted down or not, you should definitely note down that information in the logbook. That's all for legal requirements and to protect yourself if something goes wrong. All correct signals should be indicated prior to approach. So sometimes some pilot stations require you to display flag signals or light signals if it's a night, and day flag signals if it's day. Sometimes they require certain shapes to be displayed, so those should be displayed. Engines should be placed on standby in ample time, and the master will come on the bridge and of course test out the astern propulsion as well. The estimated time of arrival would be updated with the pilotage authority and the speed of engagement with the pilot vessel or launch. Radar reduced to 6-mile range on approach or shorter range. Both your radars and RPUs should be operating, one on a shorter range than the other. A sharp lookout should be maintained at all times for small traffic and thorough traffic affecting the area. And of course, master would take over the con and should state clearly that he or she has taken over the con from the officer. And you will note down the time at which this happens as well. The next question is, when instructed to inspect, check and test the bridge navigation equipment prior to sailing, what actions would you take as the officer who's testing out the equipment? So you can start by saying that you would follow the company checklist or the ISM checklist for departure, pilot stage, departure port. And after saying that you know that there's a checklist that exists for departure port, start with your checks regarding the bridge equipment. This would also include informing the duty engineer to monitor the rudder and the steering gear inside the steering flat, as the steering gear systems are tested from amidships to hard over to each side. So normally you as the duty officer, when departing port, you go up to the bridge at least 1 hour before departure, and you can call up the engineer as well and ask them to monitor the rudder movement. So you give a hard over to the rudder on the starboard, then on the port, bring it to the midship, then from right hard starboard to hard port. You can also note down the time. Normally it takes about 28 seconds. You should test out the telegraph movement, and they should correspond with the telegraph movement as well. You should also test out the emergency steering changeover procedures, manual to auto changeover procedures, so on and so forth. Rudder movement should be monitored by the movement of the rudder indicator on the bridge as well as in the engine room and the steering flat. RPAs and radars should be switched on and performance tested, and then left in the standby mode, not switched off. All navigation lights and domestic lights should be tested together with all instrument lights. Checks should be made on the echo sounder, communication equipment, that is VHF, signaling apparatus, inclusive of the ship's whistles and the engine room telegraph synchronization. Entry should be made in the deck logbook that all equipment was found satisfactory and in good order, and if there is any problem, you must inform the master and a senior officer on the vessel, and also note down these defects in the logbook and make sure you rectify these defects before you sail out from the port. The third question is, how would you maintain and correct the ship's navigational charts? Now I know that on most of your ships these days, or many of the modern day vessels, you have the electronic chart plotter, you have the egg disc, but I am sure that you also have the paper charts as a backup charts. Now on some vessels the master likes to use the paper charts simultaneously with the egg disc or the electronic chart plotter. In some vessels it's kept as a backup in the ship's chart, in the chart drawer. I don't know what the system is on your ship, but make sure if you have paper charts available, and which you have to in as a backup, they should be maintained under a chart management system, and you should correct them according to the weekly notices to mariners. So weekly notices to mariners are issued throughout the year. Every week a notice to mariners comes in, and notice to mariners informs you of all the corrections in the chart and the publications that are required, and all these corrections should be made to the chart, whether they are temporary notices or permanent notices, and they should be making these changes in the chart before departure port, and charts should be updated, especially voyage charts. You start with the voyage charts and then you also update the non-voyage charts. So the voyage charts are the one that you are using during your voyage, but the non-voyage charts are those which are kept on the ship, but you may not be using them because you don't go to those ports or you don't transit those areas, but they should be updated as well. So make sure you update these charts and then you note it down in the chart correction logbook. Alright, so if tomorrow a post-state officer or flag-state officer comes on board and inspects your charts, they should be updated. Question number 4 is, having obtained a morning sight of the sun, the weather changes and becomes partially cloudy around the time of noon. prior to obtaining the latitude by meridian altitude, also called as meridian passage or Mar pass. What would you do? So this basically means that you obtained a morning sight of the sun, and then the weather changed and became partially cloudy around the time of noon when you could have obtained the meridian passage. So what would you do? Because this question means that you have one position line from the morning side, but of course now you need another position line from the afternoon side, because the intersection of those two position lines gives you the position of the vessel. Now if you are not very familiar with celestial navigation, I advise you to watch my videos on the series of celestial navigations, especially staggered observations and all that. So to understand what these position lines are, how do you obtain these position lines using the sextant or the celestial observations, and how the intersection of these position lines gives you the position of the ship. Now if you don't understand these concepts, of course this question will not be clear to you, so I advise you watching the series on celestial navigation. But if you do, then of course you understand this question here. So basically you can answer this surveyor that's saying that I would anticipate the cloudy weather and calculate the limits of working on an X meridian altitude. So what is an X meridian altitude? Again, I have videos specifically made on this topic. What is X meridian? X meridian is when the celestial body is very close to the observer's meridian. It may have just been before, it could be before meridian passage or just after meridian passage. It's almost on the observer's meridian, but it has not exactly on the observer's meridian. So you can use the X meridian if you have missed the meridian passage, or if you have anticipated that you are going to miss the meridian passage, it's going to get cloudy, use the X meridian passage. In the event that cloud persists and X meridian was not obtained, try to obtain a double altitude as soon as the sun becomes visible later in the day. So you can obtain another altitude, you can obtain observations of two celestial bodies. So sometimes people use 2 or 3 stars and they simultaneously calculate the altitude and the resulting position line, and the intersection of those position lines gives you the vessel of the ship, the position of the ship. So if you're not very familiar in the area of celestial navigation, I know this answer and the question was not very clear to you, and that's why I'm repeating myself. Please watch my videos on the series of celestial navigation and it will give you a good understanding of this area. Finally, the last question for today's topic, just to keep the videos short enough to hold your interest. If you're asked, when engaged in coastal navigation, would you use the Admiralty list of lights and fog signals? And if so, how would you use it? So of course you would say, yes, I am going to use the lights list in conjunction with the navigation chart. So you cannot rely only on the navigation chart. The lights are listed geographically and it would act as an additional checking operation to match the coastal light order as represented or presented by the chart. So remember, the charts provide you with the information about the lights, but the Admiralty list of lights provides you with detailed information as well. So you can go into the Admiralty list of lights. It should be updated by the weekly notices of mariners, and you should compare the information. The light list or the Admiralty list of lights also contains more information about individual lights than is normally contained on the chart, and this fact would further enhance the safe navigation practice of the vessel. Alright, so I have discussed 5 questions today. I know they are not enough, they don't cover the entire syllabus, but like I said, I'm making a series on these. So this is video 3. I'm going to be releasing video 4 very soon, and I'll keep making videos on orals preparation and cover different areas. Every video will have a different set of questions. If you have any specific questions in mind, if you have any specific areas that you want me to discuss, please feel free to suggest me. Thank you everybody for watching these videos and subscribing to these videos. I'll see you soon with my next video, and